Hey, 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 beautiful beings. Welcome in. And on today's episode, we have Karina Wiles joining us. Welcome in, Karina.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Good. So my name is Lindsay Banks. I'm an author, shaman, founder of Temple Woman, amongst other things. And one thing which I love to do, which I haven't done for a while, is to invite guest speakers to come and share their healing modalities with us, share their journey, just to see what's out there in terms of healing, etc. So Karina, we met a few weeks ago, was it?
Yes, a well-being event in York.
Yeah, so
yes.
Yeah. So do you want to introduce yourself first then, Karina?
Yes, I will do. My name's Karina Wiles. I'm a quantum psionics practitioner, which basically in layman terms mean I work with vibrational energy, very high frequency. And I help people through this modality remove all toxic energies, entanglements, blockages from them and their energy field. Because I think a lot of us have so much negative energy on us that we don't realize we have it. You know, we've been around toxic environments, toxic people. We've probably had bad diets. We've lacked exercise. We've suffered emotional problems because the frequencies are for everything. You know, not just we have frequencies for every organ in our body, we have for our consciousness, but also our moods and our emotions and our physical well-being. So if we struggle with sort of anger and resentment and jealousy, they're at the lower end of the frequency. But in order to raise your frequency and keep at that level, it's all to do with joy, happiness, gratitude, being in nature, being active, doing things you love, really, singing, drawing, painting. That's the other end of the scale, which is high frequency. But a lot of us, we sit in the middle and we fluctuate depending on where we are. And bearing in mind what's happened over the last 2 years, it's sent most of us into a spin. So it has affected our frequency because events are frequencies as well, a lot of the negative events. So I'm finding that with people that they come through. So to put it in a simple analogy, you just want to get on a train with your bag. And you look down the platform and there's bags and boxes and suitcases and crates and everything else, and it's got your name on it and it's filled with energy, but it's not your energy. So I just say, yeah, leave that on the platform. I'm going to deal with all that. You just go on. So in the simplistic form, that's kind of what I do with my modality. So I use a dowsing technique on a specific board. So
sorry, love it. I was just going to say, I love analogies, and I love when spirit gives us analogies because it takes what can sometimes feel like really complex language and puts it into really simple terms. So I do love a good analogy. So, and when you shared that with me as well, I was like, oh my God, I love that. So with this, was this something, how were you drawn to this type of modality? Like, were you always into healing, or what's your background like?
Well, going back to the start, when I was a child, I knew I was slightly different. I was that round peg that didn't fit in to any hole. And through my teens, I started having visions and premonitions, and they were all coming true, which freaked me out because I didn't know what that was. And was I actually creating these events? And then they were happening, and was it my fault? So I shut down for a long, long time. I also went through long periods of illness, which affected me greatly. And approaching and having other healing modalities help me, I started to realize, there's something in this, you know. And over the years, I have been drawn, because I'm an artist as well, I have been drawn to nature and natural remedies. And it was probably my sort of great awakening was before 2012. And I suddenly saw the world very differently. And I thought, okay. And I had a very bizarre weekend with some ladies I'd never met before, but I knew I had to be with. And on that weekend, I encountered a medium. And he said to me, I've never seen so many angels stood around you waiting for you to open the door. And I kind of knew what he meant, because they'd said, as soon as she opens that door, she can't shut it. So she has to be ready. And I knew by then I was ready. So I was then, everything was sent my way. As we all know, it's all about timing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I was sent opportunities to learn different healing modalities, of which was Reiki and Angelic Reiki, which I still practice, and Pellowah, which was another energy entanglement that you kind of do with your hands, frequency. And then up popped Quantum Psionics. Now, Quantum Psionics was originally called Quantum Radionics, but it freaked people out because there was the association of, oh, radiation. So they changed it to psionics, and it was devised and downloaded by a lady called Regina Predo in Brazil, who then taught a lady in Portugal called Raquel Sacramento, who in turn taught me. So I'm like the third tier down. And at the time, there was very few people who were trained in this, were practicing worldwide, because it's based on ancient Egyptian alchemy and use of codes and symbols and sacred geometry into it. So it's all about different frequencies and levels. And it just seemed natural and normal as soon as I picked it up. So I resonated, and I thought, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is why it became so easy for me. And it's developed from there. And up to this point, souls have sent to me, you know, that need and are ready and are open for this. Because it is a bit daunting when you talk about frequencies and vibrations, and people immediately think, oh, it's scientific. Well, yes, it is scientific, but you don't need to know all the science behind it. It just is, and it just works. And it has had some phenomenal results for people that even I hadn't envisaged. Once you clear the decks and allow and open that person, you know, what can be attracted to them.
Because I'm always really intrigued, you know, when I hear of a new modality, and I'm always like, oh, what's this now, you know? And so how does it differ then? How do you feel it differs to Reiki?
It's because when I use my specific boards, I tune in to the higher self of the person. So as you probably know, we've got a higher self and a lower self. The lower self sits in our physical bodies and is usually very good friends with our ego. Which has saved us on many occasions, don't get me wrong, the ego is a savior, but it can also doubt yourself, and you override your intuition, which is usually what you can associate with your higher self. It's that one that goes, turn right, don't turn left. And then you go, oh, why didn't I follow my instinct? So when I talk to the soul, I talk to their higher self. So unlike Reiki, when I tune in, and I have to have permission, obviously, to do this, otherwise it will not let me do it. I tune in to the higher self, and I talk solely to that person in the higher self. So I can be anywhere in the world, you can be anywhere in the world. You don't have to be right in front of me, because once you are on my board, then I've got you. And I can talk, and we can work out, and I measure the frequencies of that individual that they are currently and what the potential is. Now, the way that I work, I'm real cut to the chase. Let's get in, let's sort everything out. There are others that are a bit more subtle, a bit more gentle, but I found my approach, it just gets in there and clears the decks and moves on. Now, unless there is some long-term underlining issue, mostly one session, the first session's 2 hours, because I do a lot of chatting to the individual to give me an idea of patterns that are linked back to the generations, because again, the energy comes through, the entanglements will come through, family lineage. That 2 hour session usually suffices for people, because the decks are cleared and off we go. Only occasionally, if there's an underlying problem that we address it, it will need more than one session. but on the whole, I found that is enough. So I think the difference between Reiki, yes, it's sending energy, but mine is channeled into that individual in a very specific way. And the measurements I have and the charts and everything I go through. Yeah, that's what differs it from Reiki. And it works over a period of time as and when the individual's meant to have this opportunities arise for them. Yeah, so, and the great thing is, like a lot of these modalities, is that you don't really have side effects. The only ones I've ever encountered are a person literally fell asleep in front of me and started snoring. A lady burst into tears, but she had just recently lost her baby, so that was understandable release. Or people say, oh, I felt really sort of run down and heavy, and then all of a sudden 2 or 3 days later I popped out of it and I feel amazing. I feel like a new person. I feel lighter. So that's it. That's all I've ever encountered to date, and that's usually through the clearing process, you know. So yeah, I think that's what the difference is. But of course this modality is very complementary with and can enhance other modalities, so it's only part and parcel. So if an individual is having homeopathy or acupuncture or anything like this, this is only going to enhance that by clearing off what you don't energy on you that you don't need. That is going to open you up more to receiving treatments, alternative treatments, or first line treatments, as I call.
I was going to say, because I think sometimes, you know, I was thinking this earlier on, that sometimes we just need to meet one person and have one healing session with them, and then we'll continue along our journey, then someone else comes along. And if we talk, like, I'm happy to share a little bit about my experience with you. So, you know, so we did the session last week, and initially I did feel quite sleepy. And when I was describing it to people afterwards, I just kept saying it felt very galactic. So it felt very much like it was on another level to any sort of healing modalities that I've had myself before. And I think that very much is to do with sort of doing that healing across time and space as well. So we went back 3 centuries, and I saw myself as a witch, and I was shouting and screaming at people for not listening to me. And then we went back 4 centuries where I could see myself as a really angry man killing someone else, but there was just such anger within him, you know, which I feel is sort of like, you know, I've had outbursts of anger in the past, and that feels very much sort of like as if something's cleared and shifted in there. But that it was probably a little bit later on, Karina, where I just felt like I was exhausted. I felt like so much work had been done in my energetic field. I went to bed at 7:30 that night and just slept. And it's definitely, you know, for me, it, like I said, it felt like it was on another level. So and like, I love the fact that, you know, we can work across distance and we can work across space, you know, to do with energy and everything else. But yeah, and so I think you found there was four entities attached to me, and there was a banshee curse. And
often get curses and spells through family lineage, because as you said, you know, it's across time and space. So when I go in, it's going back lots of generations, and depending also where people come from, which countries, they tend to have different spells and different curses. So it can go way back, and not just your family lineage, but as you've just said, your past lifetimes, the energy within those that we bring through with us if it's not cleared at a specific lifetime. So there's so many levels to it, that it really cleanses and cuts and severs cords, energetic cords. But I'm only ever allowed to do what I'm allowed to do. So if a soul is on a particular journey that they have to learn, it will not let me undo certain things. Okay. And it's certainly not a cure. Like most of our modalities aren't a cure. So what I say to people is, once I've cleared you off, the responsibility is handed back to you now to then run with it. because it's so easy, and I have had one or two clients that slip back a bit into old ways because it's easy, and they start reconnecting and making new energetic frequency chords back to old habits and start to spiral down again. So, you know, it is a difficult one, but if you feel the difference, that's usually enough to go, right, I'm not going back to where I was before. That was horrible. I'm going to move forward. But also the opportunities and the people and everything that comes into your life, you're just like, oh, I never thought of that. Or, you know, I've had lots of clients, but some very interesting ones, which I can tell you of one. It took 2 or 3 goes because it was trying to get to the actual problem. It was an older gentleman who lived in an old house in France. He'd been drawn back to this area with his wife, and all the family said, why are you going back there? It turns out he had an affinity with the area because he'd lived there in a previous life. He'd been a local farmer. And he started having what his wife described as episodes at like 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but it was every day. And I was thinking, what on earth? And because of what I do, I not only clear people, I have another board that clears environments, so homes, cars, workplaces, schools. And so I cleared everything off, and we were still getting this. I thought, it's got to be something connected with the land. So I went back in and I found out that in this previous lifetime, the locals had not liked him and they'd killed him. And guess what time they'd killed him? Between 2 and 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Wow.
So it's just incredible once you start drilling down to it. Sometimes it needs a bit of investigation, but it's extraordinary. You know, even now people say, how does it work? And I said, well, to be honest, I don't really know. And I don't know that we need to know. You just need to know it works. I mean, you could go off and do all the research yourself in quantum physics and all the rest of it, but I don't think any of us who are on this plane helping heal people have time to do that, to be honest, at all. It's like, no.
Do you feel that in order to do the quantum psionics, that you have to already be a medium or a channeler or have all these different abilities? Or is it something that if people want to learn, they learn that and it opens them up along the way?
Yes, I don't think you have to be anything in particular to learn this. I think it'll just resonate. The only thing is, I don't know whether the school who taught me are still training, because they tend to move on, and I am not allowed to train it in the way I was trained. So that's the only snag there. I've not heard, but I think anybody who's open to anything, learning or anything, will be drawn to what they're meant to be drawn to. And sometimes having clearings helps you focus and have clarity, doesn't it? Oh yes, I fancy having a go at that. And I think it's always down to trying everything and seeing what fits. And I think most of us who are in the healing fraternity have probably done that. They've learned Reiki, they've learned Angelic Reiki, they've learned this, they've learned that. But it's whatever resonates with you. What are you resonating at? What are you drawn to? And what's your soul purpose? You know, and I think this is definitely my soul purpose.
So you were talking as well when we did the session, you were talking about levels. So can you explain a little bit about the levels that you mentioned?
The levels, what is it? And dimensional levels, or
you said that I was a level 10.
Level 10. That is your soul maturity level. This is a measurement for this, where the souls evolve and come in to learn. It's like school, really, isn't it, on Earth? We come in and we learn, and each time we learn, we go up a level. So the highest I've been informed you can be is level 10 on the planet. And that means you've been around quite a while.
I feel like that.
and I've also noticed the difference of clientele that come my way, because they are sent. I'll have batches who are all level 10, and then I'll have level 9, and then I'll have level 8, or I'll have, you know, level 7 or 5, you know, the slightly lower levels. It's when we talk about levels, we're just talking about soul maturity, how much you've learned, how much you've evolved. And that often affects the frequency, because a lot of level 10s and 9s tend to vibrate higher than the others because of more that they've learned, or they can shake things off, or can refocus, or readjust, or say, right, okay, I'm going to stop being mean and angry and everything else. Where if we're in it, we can, you know, we all dip down at some time or another, you know, depending on what happens. So yeah, that's kind of what those levels are. Yeah.
And so in terms of, say, for example, would someone just hear about it and feel drawn to it, or is there any specific, like you talked a little bit about family lineage, so if somebody had, say, for example, like an issue going back which they know is generational, would the quantum psionics be really good for helping to break those sort of like I say curses, but cycles?
Yeah, it's energetic entanglements. Yes, I have found that with a few clients where it's gone back through, whether it's an emotional trait, like they're always anxious and worried, or there's alcoholism in the family, or abuse somewhere down the line. Yes, we go in and we address that, you know, sever the links and stabilize, because a lot of us at this time on the planet are almost the backstops. You know, we are the generation that is clearing everything from all our families. You know, this is who we are. So, and often we need help with that.
Yeah.
Because we can do so much ourselves, but if there is that energy entanglement, you can't quite, it's like that itch you can't quite scratch, or you can't reach, you know. This is what I feel the modality that I work is very good at, is getting to that. Yeah, just slicing and dicing, as I call it.
I like that. Yeah, I remember saying to a friend of mine recently, I was like, you know what, because I was like, right, not only am I like homeschooling, not only am I trying to be a mom and running a business, but I've got my healing to do, I've got my parents' healing to do, my grandparents' healing to do, my ancestors' healing. I was like, oh my days, it feels massive, you know, when you first start, but it's just gradually, isn't it, just doing like a bit by bit, allowing the healing to process, and then going, right, what else do I feel that I maybe need, you know. And like you said as well earlier, which I feel is a really important point, is about taking responsibility for yourself as well once you've had that healing modality done. It's like no one else can fix you, no one else can save you, but you need to take responsibility afterwards, don't you?
Absolutely. And there are occasions that I am allowed, or I have been approached by relatives on behalf of an individual in their family who are incapacitated in some way, whether they've gone mute, or whether they've been put in a coma, or whether they've been in an accident, or in hospital. On certain occasions, I am allowed to intervene without direct permission from the individual, even though when I do connect with that individual at a higher self level, I still am only allowed to do so much. Yeah.
So is that because of free will?
Yeah, it's to do with free will, and also, again, what journey and what path and what they are personally experiencing or have to experience in this lifetime. So I can't just, you know, go, oh, well, I'll clear off the decks and then you'll be fine. No, they won't let me do that. So there are certain limits. Not that I've found much. Sometimes I can rephrase questions, or whatever I enter into the board. But yeah, it does. And then you can, there was occasion where I was approached by a friend of mine who's a lot older than me, but she had a godson, and he'd had a very stressful job. He completely imploded, gone mute, and ended up on a psychiatric ward for quite a few weeks, and won't speak to anybody. And she said, can you intervene? And I said, well, I can do what I can. Because often, and I don't know whether you've found this through your work as well, if a soul gets so traumatized, sometimes it leaves the body and it sits in the ether and just watches from afar going, oh, I'm out of here. I do find that with one or two souls. And so what I also do is because I clear the space off, I'm allowing that space in a safe environment to that soul to just creep back in. It never just goes straight back in. It just goes, oh, okay, then it's not as scary now. I might dip my toe back in. And this is what happened with this individual. I did a session on him, and she phoned me less than 24 hours later and said, he started speaking and he wouldn't stop. And he just chat. And that same day he checked himself out.
Wow, that's amazing.
But he was consumed by entities. Now, these entities are not like ghouls that we think of, ghosts that go bump in the night. Entities are negative energy that you can pick off from anybody. And we've all been in people's company who literally suck the life out of you, don't they? They don't realize they're doing it.
No.
But it's an energy, a vampire. Well, that's kind of what it is, that they have energy in their field which can penetrate into your field, and then that has an influence on you. So if you find yourself, if you're normally happy, jolly, and then suddenly you're starting to slide and everything's getting woeful and sad and depressing, it's probably because you're being controlled by this negative energy, which he was. And I've found that on quite a few people who have had a lot of dark energy in their field that controls them and keeps them in that state, because they love it. If you're down and depressed, they love it. They feed off it. Exactly. Yeah, so
just out of interest, so would you have any tips for people who maybe do have these entities within them? Is there anything that they can do in order to clear them themselves?
It depends how long they've had them, and if they are actually connected to them through the family lineage. If it's just been in the company, then what I would suggest is try and raise your own vibration by eating healthily, moving, thinking good thoughts, because that's the light coming through and radiating, and then hopefully they won't stay too long and move on to somebody else that is miserable. And but often in workplaces, I used to work in a building that we would now class as, has sick building syndrome. It just had that oppressive, and everybody walking jolly, and then 5 minutes later they're all sort of heavy and dark. So it is difficult. I think a lot of it is knowing who you are and yourself, and question yourself. Hang on a minute, why am I all sad and miserable today? What's going on? Is it something I've done, or is it somebody I've been around? A lot of the time you can adjust it just by going, okay, I now request all negative energy to leave me. Call in, if you're into the angelic realm and believe in all that, I normally call in the angelic realm or my team to say, please help me cleanse anything that's in my aura that is not mine. That's another way of doing it. Or I often have crystals in my pockets. I always wear a shungite crystal that deflects an awful lot of negative energy. And if you are somebody who's an empath and doesn't like being in huge crowds, and it can all get a bit confusing because you're picking up on everybody else's emotions, I use a Madagascan opal, and if you hang on to that while you go through the crowd, it separates your energy and your emotions and your thoughts from those around you, and you'll be able to walk through. So, but I normally, whenever I go out, I just imagine the cloak, the cloak around you of protection. Ask your team if you're going to be in some challenging environments. But just, I call it, for children, I call it the Harry Potter cloak, the invisible cloak you put over and you button down, and they like that, they get it. Like, well, you've got that, and that keeps you. And if you have that in place, that'll help you as well. But a lot of it is being aware of who you are and how you function. But there are occasions where, it is a struggle to remove it if it's on. But that's when I come into play.
Yeah.
Get in there and remove them.
Exactly. I think there's some really good tips. And like I said, when I had my session done with you, like, even though like I feel I've got quite a good awareness of who I am, I didn't realize that these beings were around me, do you know what I mean? Or like anything to do with the curses, etc. And I definitely felt lighter after. Like, I rang my dad the next day. I was like, I just slept for 11 hours last night. I had such a good night's sleep as well,
Yeah.
and because often when I'm dreaming, I'm off and I'm busy and I'm wherever I am in the astral realms, so I think there were some really good tips to share. And I think especially now, whilst with all the events and the fear mongering and everything else, it's even more important, isn't it, than now, to be aware of our energies and protecting ourselves, in order to make sure that we're not picking up other people's fears when we're going out. I used to hate crowds. Like, I used to work at a big supermarket, and then a friend of mine had invited me to Glastonbury. About Glastonbury. So I went to Glastonbury a couple of years ago, and my friend was like, oh, come on, let's get to the front of this crowd. And the idea of being in a crowd at Glastonbury freaked me out. So the only way I could manage it was to be second from the front and to not have an awareness of everyone that was behind me, because otherwise I was like, this is going to really, like, it's too much, for my energy. So like you said, putting on an invisible cloak or grounding and protecting yourself before you go out is really important. So if anyone wants to find you, Karina, what is the best way for someone to get in touch with you if they want to have one of these sessions?
Well, you can contact me by email at qphealingtransformations@gmail.com, or you can phone or text me on 07494 506 355.
Fabulous.
I am in the process of doing a website, but as you well know, everything else gets in the way, because I'm also caring for my mum, because I relocated from the south back in late 2018, luckily just before all the lockdown nonsense. So yes, still getting myself together.
It takes time. It takes time.
Oh,
All these little steps. But what I'll do is I'll put like your bio, and if people want to contact you, they'll be in the comments below as well. So if you did miss how to contact Karina, you can find the details in the comment section. So thank you so much, Karina, for joining me, and thank you for sharing your wisdom about Quantum Psionics.
Thank you for allowing me this platform to speak about it, and I hope it does resonate with people, because it does work, and it will help, and where I'm here to help, really serve. So thank you very much, Lindsay.
Thank you,
all your listeners, viewers, and
thank you, lovely.
Connect with you soon.
Bye, darling.